Oh, hey there. Sorry, I was just about to hit myself in the face repeatedly with this hammer to improve my facial symmetry. So I recently saw a very strange interview on Channel 5 with Clavicular, this guy, a 20-year-old streamer whose whole thing is to spread the good word of looks maxing, aka making oneself as attractive as possible. And towards the end of the interview, and what makes for great drama content, he gets kind of annoyed at the interviewer, Andrew.
Yeah, not a single attempt at anything in regards to looks max.
Apparently he feels like Andrew is just trying to get a good gotcha moment out of him, instead of, conducting a proper investigation into what we can all do ourselves to looks max. It comes after some pretty interesting takes, like asking what the ROI on love is.
Sorry, what's ROI? Return on investment.
Yeah. And then it culminates in a pretty neat mogging of Clavicular himself. Mogging, yes, which means what we used to call poning, or if you want to be proper about it, outclassing someone.
When you wake up every single morning and you take a look in the mirror, you're 100% satisfied with every single thing. Is that what you're talking me?
Yeah, more or less.
And Clavicular being the guy who takes meth and peptides on the regular to stream max, well, he just cannot wrap his still very clearly developing mind around someone possessing decent self-worth and who feels fine just the way they are.
Okay, dude. All right, well,
It's a little awkward in there.
I guess that's just, if you want to be completely disingenuous, that's fine with me. I guess there's just no point to continue.
Now, I'm not gonna lie, watching this interview made me sad, but most of all, it also just fascinated me in a twisted sort of intellectual way. Because looks maxing as a phenomenon really isn't all that surprising. In a lot of ways, it's just the newest form of marketable bull optimization content that falls under the umbrella of the age-old fantasy of becoming hyper-competent. Be it in terms of how good you can look, how productive you can be, or how much money you can make, all of which basically boils down to how to be most successful in whichever pursuit that you've been made to feel bad about by the very same industry of people making said content. And having watched these online trends unfold for most of my adult life now, I think I can pretty safely say that all these things have one thing in common: the extraction of money, attention, and time from poor old regular sods into tangible wealth and cash for streamers and podcasters, and most of all, the platforms that they post to. Or in other words, it's all a symptom of late-stage capitalism or techno-feudalism or those goddamn immigrants. Wait. No, sorry, I'm not sure how that one stuck in there. But the more I watch these influencers do their thing, I'm realizing it's actually so much worse. Honestly, I believe we're witnessing the end goal of capitalism play out in real time. The seeping down of individualism and narcissism into all areas of life, and turning political issues into self-help, and that into large-scale misunderstandings of virtue, or just what it actually means to live a good life in this strange, strange world of ours. Let's just call it trickle-down mogging. Okay, but what does that mean though? Well, let me connect the dots here so you have a few good talking points to both impress and depress the guests of your next dinner party. Yeah, no, so like capitalism is basically like a pyramid scheme. We got the bullshit jobs that's not making the world a better place at all.
Make a run for it.
I really think everyone needs to know about capitalism because this is not sustainable. Have you heard of economic growth? It's just like absurd random metrics. Now, the other day I was sitting at a cafe pondering life, and I look up and I see this younger guy in his early 20s dressed up, fresh attire and a clean haircut sitting on his phone. This is not him, by the way. This is a reenactment with my friend Raul.
Say hi, Raul.
But he's sitting there by himself, earbuds in, watching a live stream of two guys who are about the same age as himself. And these guys on the screen are seemingly just hanging out outside, vaping and stuff, and just casually talking to the camera. Talking to it as if it were one of their buds. I don't know what they were saying, but I can only assume that it was something quite meaningful. I mean, why else would a guy just sit and watch two other guys hanging out? Well, as much as I want to believe that, and as much as I want to make fun of this poor sod for sitting in a cafe alone watching a live stream, the sad truth is that he was probably just lonely. and it felt like the closest thing to hanging out with friends. Now, if I've diagnosed this situation correctly, it tells us two very unsurprising things about our modern society. One, people are just really lonely nowadays, and two, the default way to address that loneliness is to pseudo-socialize on social media. Statistically, we know the first one's true. Take a look at these graphs from a US government report on our so-called epidemic of loneliness. They all show patterns in factors closely related to loneliness. So yeah, people are more lonely. Big surprise, I know. But actually, and this is just a little pet peeve of mine, framing loneliness as an epidemic, which implies that it's some sort of unexpected virus spreading outside our control, actually makes no sense in a world that's commodified how we humans connect with each other through algorithms. And if you agree with that, you agree with point 2 too. And influencers like Clavicular seem to know this, and they figured out how to sell, quite literally through courses and products, an easy solution. Become the best version of yourself that you can be. Or as I like to think of it, become hyper-competent at something. When it comes to loneliness and self-worth issues, mirroring the former fad of pickup artistry, remember these guys?
It's makeout time!
Well, Clavicular believes the road to redemption is to just look really good and then leverage your looks or whatever to hook up with as many women as possible. Because then you can actually climb the hierarchy of society as envisioned by other dudes. And then he inevitably follows it up with something like this.
Women above the ages of really like 22 are utterly useless.
Now, looks maxing is nothing new. Historically, we've just never put it in such polemical terms as the extreme of maxing. And generally, it's mostly been geared towards women in the form of, unrealistic beauty standards or the male gaze and all that, ultimately to sell a mind-boggling amount of products. And at the surface level, this is what seems to drive all sorts of hypercompetence content in general, and there are a lot of sorts. Just as insecurity and loneliness leads young guys to looks maxing, other causes are addressed by other influencers who are into other sorts of maxings. Take this guy, Dr. Neuroscientist Andrew Huberman. He has one of the most popular podcasts in the world, and he's often seen as a more healthy alternative to red pill influencers like Andrew Tate. He probably appeals more to a broad and older audience than Clav does, and he's all about democratizing science to improve your mental and physical health, to become successful in life. And to do that, he says, you gotta productivity max your routines and buy supplements.
Let's talk about how to apply quality peer-reviewed science to your day, and how to optimize everything from sleep to learning, creativity, meal timing, etc. As many of you know, I've been taking AG1 for nearly 15 years now.
Classic, right? But actually he also gives advice about healthy relationships.
It's also very clear, based on the emerging literature, that romantic relationships, that emotional empathy and cognitive empathy are both required in order to establish what we call a trusting social bond.
On the surface level, this really doesn't sound too bad. But then when you hear a guy talk about what it means to have a good relationship while he's also in 6 exclusive relationships, but all of which happen to be at the same time, apparently spreading STDs and obviously lying to his partners, well, yeah. But okay, that's just a sign that he's kind of a douche. It's not really a problem with his actual content, is it?
It doesn't matter if you block the blues.
Yeah.
If you're looking at bright light at night, you're going to disrupt your circadian. This concept of blue light being bad led to a lot of product development. People that made these products failed to actually read the papers start to finish, or if they did, they didn't comprehend a critical element. And I designed these glasses, which as you can see have red lenses that filter out the specific short wavelengths of light that activate the cells that wake you up.
Nice. Now, it's pretty much impossible to tell whether these people actually believe in what they say or if it's just a money thing. I think it's definitely a spectrum though, with Huberman being on the sleazy salesman side of things. Anyway, their motivations don't really matter all that much anyway. It's the effect they have that matters. And the biggest issue with someone like Huberman, and we'll get to why, is that he makes everything you do about you. And after watching a fair bit of this stuff, a common denominator that I keep seeing with these Maxxxer type people is that success is always tied to you achieving some sort of quantifiable metric, often backed up by science even. Be it how much space is between your eyes relative to your cheekbones, I think, or how healthy your vitals are, or how much oxytocin is released from your relationship.
Oxytocin for oxytocin of oxytocin.
Or how you can please like and subscribe to my channel. In other words, success is always tied to some objective metric that you can achieve. And that is how you win in this tough world of ours. Focus on yourself, have discipline, train yourself, and buy their supplements, of course. And that brings us to Brian Johnson, who seems to appeal less to younger guys' desire to get laid and make money, and more to our general fear of death. Johnson is all about maxing out his physical health in order to live forever. He's the kind of guy who quit coffee because it increased his sleep score by 9%. But okay, to be fair, that does mean that he can consistently wake up at 5 a.m., which is actually the optimal time to take his few dozen pills daily.
Next, for breakfast, I will have Blueprint Longevity Protein and Berry Nut Mix, collagen peptides, extra virgin olive oil, and 100% pure cacao with a few dozen pills.
I love how he just casually goes over regular food and then says that.
A few dozen pills.
That sounds like a lot of pills to swallow, dude. Well, that's what I thought at first, but then I found out he actually sells his essential capsules on his website. And it has everything you need in one pill, including essential supermolecules. So I'd never heard of supermolecules, so I went ahead and looked it up and I got this. It says supramolecules, not supermolecules, but I think that's what he's talking about because I couldn't find anything about supermolecules. But apparently it has some benefits for health, but I feel like if you didn't know how to spell it, you shouldn't buy it. I don't know about you, but that's just like a general rule of thumb I have. And finally, and I think we can all relate to this one being on YouTube and all, I see you. For those of us who are struggling with laziness or apathy, there's a truly disturbingly long list of productivity influencers ready to max out your entrepreneurship skills. Their message is that life sucks because you simply can't get any work done. My all-time favorite is this ex-Navy SEAL dude who was really big a few years ago. He tells us how to attack Monday like a Navy SEAL. His whole bit is about doing hard things through discipline. Actually, here he is on the Huberman podcast explaining how easy it is to do difficult things. All you have to do, he says, is just get over that initial hump.
And the first freaking 17 minutes, the first 23 minutes, just suck. They just suck. And what was beautiful was by the time I was 23, 24 years old, I'm like, oh yeah, this is going to suck for 17 minutes. And then it's going to be, I'm going to be a robot and it doesn't matter anymore. I can just keep going forever.
Yeah, so when doing something hard, it's important to remember that after around 17 to 23 minutes, you'll become a robot. But that's actually a good thing because...
when something sucks, good.
He also likes to wake up really early to take a cold bath.
I have a cold bath in my house and I get in every day. Yep.
How long are you spending in there?
Usually around 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Before you train or after you train?
After.
Now, I understand where he's coming from, taking a cold bath before his workout. But personally, I found that if you wake up at noon and take a really hot shower with all your clothes on in a fetal position, it works really well if you do it before you train. If you start at rock bottom, there's really no way but up. But okay, the point is, if you're lazy, lonely, depressed, anxious, bored, afraid, depressed, I said that. If you feel like a failure in some aspect of life, these people have the answers. Focus on yourself through discipline, competence, and maxing out some aspect, and you will achieve success. And that in itself is actually really smart engagement maxing, because even before algorithms and capitalism, seems like us humans have always had a bit of an obsession about becoming hyper competent. I mean, just think about the stories we've imagined throughout the ages. Hercules is super strong, Achilles is indestructible. Almost. Samurais, just like the later 80s and 90s ninjas, are just super extraordinarily competent at a specific set of skills that make them seem almost magical. And they got there because of their sheer discipline to the grind, mirroring how Willing titled his book years later, Discipline Equals Freedom. Field manual, which Gina sums up in her review as about as useful as a drill sergeant yelling at you for 30 minutes. But yeah, we've been fantasizing about this stuff forever, and underlying this fantasy is the idea that we can theoretically improve our situation in life if we just work hard enough. if we put in the hours. Like in theory, you could train for 16 hours a day and just become really good at something. The potential is there. It's probably not going to happen, sorry to break it to you, but you know, this awareness or fantasy that we can potentially, theoretically max out ourselves has always been hovering right above our heads. And that awareness can be quite inspiring for sure, but it can also provoke a lot of anxiety because you can never really live up to your own potential. And that became pretty clear just around 150 years ago when we got the second Industrial Revolution. Yay, history time! Pretty excited about this because I got my producer's help to write this part. Okay, so what you have to understand about the Second Industrial Revolution is that it organized society into two natural groups of people, the noble aristocracy and immigrants. Again, immigrants, that's the best you got. Also, why are you always wearing that t-shirt? Is it supposed to make some sort of statement or something? Well, yeah, I'm a racist. Thought that was fairly obvious. All right. Yeah, so I think I'll just stick with my original script here. Also, I'm starting a podcast. Okay, so the Second Industrial Revolution led to new types of machinery that quite literally extended our abilities as humans into new and previously unimaginable limits. In a short while, relatively speaking, we went from horses to flight, candles to electricity, letters to telephones, and so on and so forth. And these new industrial technologies seems to have changed the benchmark for what we imagine as possible, and we see that in the stories that follow. Just look at the 1938 Superman and what he can do. He can fly like a plane. He's got X-ray vision like an X-ray machine. He's got heat vision like a laser or a welding torch. Superman is basically just a flying catalog of industrial technologies. Superman has gone on to become one of the most popular and recognized icons of modern times, and partly I think that's because he's the epitome of what it means to be a hyper-competent individual. The ordinary youngster who suddenly finds himself with the power of industry itself. Now that's a story that inspires hope. Well, it's certainly a welcome escape to read if you're an ordinary sob in 1938 stuck in a factory job, faced with an increasing anxiety that coincidentally also surged alongside industrialization. Because of course, while industrialization enabled us to produce things at previously unimaginable limits, the rewards of that productivity didn't go to regular folk. It went to the owners of factories, the Jeff Bezoses and the Musks of the time. Oh, it's really weird to say musks in plural. It sounds like musk, as in the smell. Anyway, for working class people, industry mostly just translated into increasingly unnatural or alienated or precarious lives, doing monotonous tasks all day at the assembly line, and without decent compensation. Just look at Charlie Chaplin's 1936 film, Modern Times, which shows workers at the mercy of machines. Like Chaplin's other films, and unlike the escapist appeal of Superman, Modern Times is a reflection and commentary on the political issues of the times. In this case, the critique is focused on the widespread unrest workers felt. Here, that's depicted via the main character who literally prefers prison over labor in the factory. I mean, if someone's gonna tell you what to do all day and every day, you might as well be fed and housed too, right? It's a bit of a caricaturization for sure, but it also reflects the unrest and anxiety that average people felt at the time. Just like our favorite movie Parasite today. I don't know why I did that. Parasite is a great movie. Now Chaplin, just like the Luddites who literally destroyed industrial machines as a protest to their exploitation just about 100 years prior to that, well, he didn't hate the technologies themselves. They are innate objects after all. Chaplin, like the Luddites, was responding, and quite rationally I should add, to the fact that these new technologies were being introduced into an emerging economic system that had no interest in sharing its benefits with the people who were doing the actual work. And that means it wasn't necessarily these new technologies that created the general angst at the time, but the economic structure and the culture that they helped solidify. A system of workers precariously and individually selling their time as labor but not receiving the fruit of that labor. A culture which increasingly told people that they themselves hold the key to their success and livelihood in their own hands, that their job is just to pull themselves up by the bootstraps in the zero-sum game of life. That's the American dream, buddy. But don't just take my word for it, because I brought a book with me today. I just gotta find it. Okay, whatever. The historian on capitalism, Sven Beckert, writes, as the capitalist civilization moved inward, it commanded individuals to exercise self-control and focus on the project of self-making, to better market their labor power. We see that attitude in booklets and manuals as far back as 1847, actually, like this one, Advice to Young Men on Their Duties and Conduct in Life, which urged individuals to acquire skills in high demand to gain an advantage in the labor market. Other titles from the times include the 1859 book Self-Help, timeless classic, and Men Who Have Risen, a book for boys. Books like these were inspiring to read for losers because they told stories of poor boys climbing to the top. Some books also just straight up told people that they need to get that money, like the 1884 Millionaires and How They Became So, or my personal favorite, The Art of Money Getting from 1882. I swear, this one still holds up. The point is, as society moved further away from communal agricultural style living into a division of labor-styled factories, a new sort of worldview emerged alongside of it, one that connected success to individual responsibility and hard work. And so, even though it's really the economic system that caused the bad feelings, the answer that was sought out seemingly became more about you. You as an individual have the responsibility to address those feelings, and less about the deeper cause, addressing, the economic structures and all that. And it makes sense because it is a lot easier to fix yourself.
My wife's tough to live with.
It's a lot easier than fixing society anyway. I mean, that requires just like so many people to get together and talk about politics and strategize. But still, these feelings did fuel a few courageous critiques of society, like, Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times, which points the finger at the economic structures that created these deplorable conditions for workers. But the feelings also seem to fuel the emergence of a new superhero or optimized individual, aka the birth of Superman, who's compared to the technologies of the day and whose job was to save the day. And of course, lots and lots, just so many self-help guides and books on how you, as an individual, can help yourself out of the position causing you anxiety. I mean, for every Modern Times or Parasite that we get, I swear we get like 15 Marvel or DC superhero movies. And for every published book like this, we get a mind-boggling amount of self-help books. In 2025, actually, over 15,000 self-help books were published in the US alone. Also, the personal development market is worth over $50 billion now, and it's been showing steady growth in the past decades. Now, believe it or not, I'm actually not just bringing up these numbers to illustrate how popular individualism as a fix has become, and not because I want to show off my research skills either. No, I think these numbers reflect something else going on. Something nefarious. In fact, I think these numbers reflect how this worldview we've had imposed onto us of individual responsibility has turned the innate fascination we have with hypercompetence into something we need to buy. Throughout the 1900s, it also started seeping into other parts of our lives beyond just our role as workers. It became commodified. Actually, I think therapy is a pretty telling example. And look, I'm not here to hate on therapy. I'm just trying to understand how this worldview has become normalized and now commercialized. According to the contemporary philosopher Alasdair MacIntyre, the therapist as a role became popular because it filled a gap. That is, that there was a general meaning left by the decline of religion, and the role of the therapist was to address that gap. But to MacIntyre, instead of questioning what it actually means to live a good life worth pursuing, the therapist's role is to help you function better in whichever framework that you've already accepted, to adjust, basically. And we can see that especially from the 60s and on, when therapists started viewing the concept of narcissism in their patients very differently than they previously had.
Now we're getting somewhere.
According to the historian Eli Soretsky, before the 60s, the OG of them all, Freud, generally saw narcissism as a pathology, as something we must rise above to become mature adults who fit into society. Just like me, basically. Just kidding, I am not. I am actually an adult. I don't know why that's a joke. But by the 1960s, it seemingly changed. Less and less therapists tried to cure people of their self-focus and instead began to treat it with a, quote, affirmative attitude, helping patients use those feelings to build self-esteem and better relationships. And this view seeped into political discourse as well. According to Soretsky, people in movements like the New Left or early feminism argued that focusing on your identity, how you see yourself and how others see you, wasn't selfish. No, it was a way to stand up against a repressive society. And I'm not saying that these movements weren't good for marginalized groups like women. My point is that This new identity politics tried to address the problems caused by society in general by shifting even further inward towards recognition and self-image. Around the same time, wellness entered the lexicon. In 1959, the medical practitioner Halbert L. Dunn legitimized the concept of wellness as a, quote, integrated method of functioning which is oriented towards maximizing the potential of which the individual is capable. Now, Dunn also stressed the importance of communication and fellowship with other people, and even love, as integral to wellness, but that's not really what caught on. I'm sorry, Dunn, but there's really no business model in that. No. Instead, soon enough, wellness as a concept was taken by entrepreneurs who linked it to the ethos of working on yourself more often than not through some material form of health and fitness. And eventually, guys like Dr. Huberman looked at Dunn's argument and thought, interesting. But what if instead it was a drug or supplement?
AG1.
Because that's where the money lies. And this is pretty obvious from our perspective today. Wellness and self-care soon became synonymous with skincare products aimed more at women, like creams, serums, SPFs, retinols, toners, essences, and more creams like eye creams and neck creams and blah 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 creams, and of course supplements aimed more at men, like vitamins, minerals, adaptogens, nootropics, collagen powders, protein shakes, green powders, or whatever AG1 is supposed to be exactly. Oh, and don't forget the supermolecules. These are all things that can be sold to us. And influencers are just the latest and perhaps most troubling iteration of the ideology that espouses the view that life is about maximizing your potential in the zero-sum game of life. Just for fun, I tried to sign up for a Clavicular system. It's only $50. Not too outrageous, I guess, but it literally asked me for my credit score. Is that normal? I don't know, man. I've never done one of these courses before, but that seems kind of like an invasion of privacy. But I guess the thing with social media is you don't necessarily even need to sign up for this for their money to flow. Because of course, they're not just selling their ideas for money. Generally, if you're watching Clavicular stream or Huberman's podcast or whatever, it feels free. That's actually Huberman's whole thing.
Is, however, part of my desire and effort to bring zero cost to consumer information about science and science-related tools to the general public.
Yeah, sorry to break it to you, doctor, but you're actually part of a little something called the attention economy. Now, you probably know this already, but I guess it's good to have a reminder every now and then. When we watch this sort of stuff, we very much are paying. Not always with money, but always with our attention. And yes, I know there's a certain amount of irony here, me telling you this on YouTube. I'd like to think that I'm not actively making the world worse, though, with my content. At least I'm not selling supplements yet. Actually, this is what I made on YouTube ads last month, so yeah. I'm barely paying my rent here.
I try not to take any sponsorships, but if you want to support the channel, I have a Patreon. You can come and join the community. Got a Discord as well. It's good stuff. You should come and join us. Yeah, also lying down and taking a shower is pretty dope.
But yeah, watching these guys, well, it puts money into their pockets, but more importantly, also into the pockets of platform corporations who get to show you all sorts of ads for new cars. But Mr. Stanford Professor Man actually already knows this himself.
We are living in a war of attention. My advice to anyone who wants to be successful in any domain, take your real life to Instagram and be very cautious about taking Instagram to your real life. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, not really. Also, just on a tangent here, but why are there so many car commercials? My lord, I really don't understand it. I don't even have enough money to buy a used car, let alone a new Ford garbage can or a Chrysler oil truck or whatever. Actually, it's starting to make a lot more sense why Clavicular is asking for my credit score now. But yeah, because we're paying with our attention, this stuff is just really easy to watch because it's technically free. But that also means that their message or ideology just becomes a lot more widespread and popular. I mean, you don't even need to pay a therapist or buy a self-help book anymore. And I'm not necessarily saying that to compare them. The point is, the answer to your problems now just pops up on the For You page for free now. And that's a problem because this message that's in peak popularity right now, by the way, that we can all be mega rich and successful and beautiful and then it's all on us, well, it's bogus. And that's because the picture of success that these people paint is based on the premise that competition and self-obsession will alleviate the anxieties imposed onto us by the increasingly unfair and alienating economic system that we live under, aka capitalism. But if you live in a rich country, that can be quite a difficult distinction to make or see. Back in industrial times, the misery of life was fairly legible. You worked 16-hour days in a dead-end factory job and got paid barely enough to survive, while the owner of the building got rich. But today, apart from our alienating office culture and the misery in the global south that we depend on, we could say that the platforms own the factory. And instead of our labor, what's being extracted is our attention, which we trade in for the very loneliness that we seek to alleviate. It's a straight up evil business model that runs on our discontent. Like a genuinely content person who feels connected and satisfied and at peace with themselves is a terrible user because they don't scroll for long enough. Which means that the platforms have a real financial interest in the loneliness crisis and in making people feel like a failure. Not even in a conspiratorial way. Like, I don't think anyone just sat down one day and decided to make an entire generation of people miserable. Although I wouldn't put it past people like Zuckerberg. God, I love that clip. But the incentives are built into the structure of the platforms. As Shoshana Zuboff puts it in her seminal book, Surveillance Capitalism, AI engagement maxing algorithms are indifferent to whether the engagement leads to social benefits or just straight up compulsive behavior. It just wants more of it because that means more data for tailor-targeted ads. But as easy as it is to link our personal anxieties to superficial personal failures, there's something looming in the background here, just as there was 100 years ago. An economic structure that is more dynamic than any other. In fact, it's so dynamic that it's commercialized how we respond to its very own imposed afflictions. Afflictions like, the anxiety I keep talking about, the precarity, the loneliness, that have less to do with your ability as a person and more to do with the historically high economic inequality, increasingly out of control housing and living costs, and a general precarity with smaller and smaller social safety nets. And of course, bullshit jobs. It's a system that's raised an entire generation of people doing everything they were told to do. Working hard, getting educated, trying to build a life, who end up finding that the basic things that their parents took for granted are just straight up out of reach. These things aren't personal failings, but they do produce personal feelings. The feeling that you're somehow behind, and if you just optimized a bit harder, the gap might close, but it won't. This gap isn't produced by a lack of competence. It's produced by 40-odd years of policy choices that has funneled wealth upwards and left the infrastructure of the collective to rot. Things like affordable housing, public education, healthcare, and public spaces and job security. And those things, as the queen of neoliberalism and former Prime Minister of the UK, Margaret Thatcher, put it back in 1987, there is no such thing as a society. No, there are individual men and women, and there are families, and no government can do anything except through people, and people look to themselves first. But of course, like anything that came from Thatcher the Milk Snatcher's ironclad heart, that's a load of BS, ma'am. I think McIntyre puts it very neatly in one of his later works, where he writes about the idea of a self-sufficient individual as an illogical fantasy. Here he points out that someone who's disciplined and optimized, who's maxed their way to independence, is not just politically convenient for the people who benefit from the status quo, it's also just philosophically incoherent. He argues that humans are not and have never been self-sufficient. We are vulnerable, dependent creatures from the moment that we're born till the moment we die. Of course, there are parts of our lives where we are particularly high functioning, for sure. Like when we're 25 to 50 or something like that. But to get there, we need to be raised and cared for. And so during that time, it's only fair that when we function especially well, we raise and care for the kids and those who are older too. Point is, we rely on each other, not as a weakness to be overcome through maximizing ourselves, but as the basic precondition of any kind of flourishing at all. Years later, the historian Rutger Bregman put it like this in his book Humankind, and I'm paraphrasing here. We as a species became the masters of planet Earth, not because the fittest survive, but because the kindest survive, the most cooperative. That's basically our strength. And just to add to that, when Darwin talked about survival of the fittest, which he didn't coin even, well, he didn't mean the literal strongest, like fit as in going to the gym. He meant fittest in terms of how well we fit into our circumstances, like how well we adapt. And that's a pretty crucial difference that conveniently quite often gets misunderstood. As Beckert points out, Darwinism has historically been used to justify the quote antagonism between capital and labor, these bad feelings basically. Especially those who benefit from an unfair system have throughout history used the argument that social differences are the result of quote a process of natural selection as certain and rigid as any other part of the mechanism of the world.
Wait, so people have used race just like individual competencies to justify the status quo?
Yes, exactly, dude.
Wow, I think I've really learned something. You know what? I don't even think I should wear this t-shirt anymore.
Yeah, okay, if you don't mind, I'm in the middle of recording here.
Right.
Not everything is about you.
Okay, yeah, no. It's fine. I'll just be back.
Yeah.
I'll just go now.
Anyway, where was I? Yeah, I'll take it from here. A system that produces anxiety, precarity, loneliness, and so on, and then sells a convenient but bogus solution. And I'll tell you why it's bogus. It's 2 reasons. 1, the cause of these anxieties is often systemic, so the solution also needs to be addressed systematically. That is, politically. Housing regulations, wealth taxes, platform regulations, investing in public healthcare and infrastructure, etc. To address the anxieties imposed by these things, we need to change the things themselves, not ourselves, and that happens through voting, organizing, pressuring politicians, and so on. And 2, even if the problems, the anxieties, are personal, because yeah, of course, not all our personal problems are because of capitalism, well, making everything about you and your routine and becoming hyper-competent and optimizing, well, that just misses the point completely. Now, of course, this is more of a philosophical question, so you may not agree here. Just look at Clavicular himself. By his own admission, he had no friends in high school, and I'm not saying that to mock him, but quite the opposite, actually.
My entire life, I was pretty much invisible. You know, in high school, I wouldn't talk to anyone. I pretty much had no friends.
Just like the guy I saw at the cafe, it's super easy to make fun of this dude. But honestly, I also feel kind of bad for him too, because capitalism basically soul-mogged him. He was a lost teenager who spent his formative years during the pandemic in front of social media all day, uncertain and struggling in exactly the way that a lot of young people are struggling right now. And so he turned to the internet and found one of the answers that I've been discrediting for like 30 or 40 minutes now. The reason that you're in a bad place is because of your incompetence, which for him is very much linked to appearance. And look, in a very narrow sense, it kind of worked for him. He's got an audience, an income, and a sense of purpose, I suppose. But despite that, he can't answer if he's happy. In another interview, he gets asked if he's more happy now than when he was 14.
You feel happier now than when you were 14?
Honestly, I don't think I really even know what that word means or have any way to define it in a personal context of what happiness is or like what that feels like. I would just say that my quality of life has generally improved in every way. Like the lifestyle that I live, having someone cook my food, having people to clean my house, it's all very nice things.
Yes. His quality of life improved, which is a very different thing. Quality of life is a metric. Happiness isn't. And it's hard, maybe even impossible, to define what happiness means or to live a good life because these things are subjective. But even those metrics, like having someone clean your house or cook your food or whatever, well, for Clav, they're also contingent on having to perform on stream and going out to clubs and taking peptides and meth to do so, and a lifestyle that is by any reasonable measure not sustainable. And of course it doesn't translate to his viewers either, because whatever marginal gains that Clav made by restructuring his entire existence around self-optimization, well, those gains came from a very specific set of circumstances that his audience doesn't share. But above all, how can you be happy, or maybe content, or peaceful are better words, when it's never enough?
Is there any 10s out there, like people who have...
No.
Really?
No.
Will there ever be a sort of messiah?
Not with the technology we have now.
There will never be a perfect person. That's a pretty bleak place to land if you've built your entire career around physical perfection. It's quite an ironic thing for Clav to acknowledge, I think, because it shows that he knows that the goalpost doesn't exist. And still, he can't stop running towards it and telling other people to do exactly the same. And actually, I think that's the deepest problem with the hypercompetence worldview. It's always about making yourself better somehow, which means it's always about the future, measured against some ideal that keeps moving. And just quite logically, that view is completely incompatible with being content.
For your time.
Thank you.
So when I watch this interview, I guess the Buddhist in me just can't help but feel a little bit sad for this guy. For me anyway, I have this temptation to just write these types of people off completely. He's a narcissist, he's toxic, and so on. But I think the more honest view is to see the mental state that's running guys like Clav at the moment. The greed, the insecurity, the hunger for recognition. How awful that must be, actually. To be so completely overpowered by those states that you end up selling them to other people. Of course, we can and should critique Clavicular's behavior, but there's no real point in judging him personally. He's already living the consequences, I'm sure. And I don't think having this kind of more compassionate view means passively accepting the conditions that produced him too. Like the algorithms that promote this stuff because it's engaging, or the economic structure that we have that causes so much misery across the global south and working classes. These are things that both McIntyre and even the Buddha himself more than 2,500 years ago would say that we need to focus on. But alone, on a personal level, we can also change something. We can be more aware of the effects of this kind of hyper-competent, individualized marketing on our minds. Not to achieve spiritual hyper-competence, but to learn to recognize and then to let go of the notion that it's all our own responsibility. We can begin to see how truly interdependent and connected we all are. And we can even see how these reactions shape our thinking. And then we can begin to see how our reactions are threatening to turn us all into clavicular. Before I go, I want to give a thanks to all my lovely Patreon supporters. A special thanks to Flacky, as always, and Emperor Vias and Louis Rebillard. And, of course, a big thanks to all my other patrons. Couldn't do this without you guys. If you want to support me, giving as little as a cup of coffee a month goes a really long way for me to continue doing what I'm doing here. And before I sign off, I'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What do you think of my take on hypercompetence? And, yeah, have a nice rest of your day.